Hey, welcome back to the Men Podcast, everybody. I am super excited to do this podcast. It's been a long time coming, and I had the opportunity just yesterday to fish with an old friend, Russ Miller. May I remind you, the Men Podcast has no ads. There's no monetization. It's just us chit chatting about fly fishing, trying to help you get better. Make sure to follow the podcast, and if you just like it, follow it, comment on it. I always want to know what you guys want to hear more of, and that's a great way to do it. And also, if you've got podcast suggestions or ideas, just email joe@redsflyshop.com. I'm always listening. So, without further ado, I got Russ Miller on the podcast today. We fished yesterday. Russ has got a long and distinguished pedigree in fly fishing, and so it's a treat to have him on here. Yeah, how you doing, Russ?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Russ, give us your. I don't have any walk up music or anything for you, but give us your intro, a little background about you.
Yeah, I'll hype it up. I I've spent my entire career working in the fly fishing industry largely. I've done everything from the retail side of things, in guiding, some walkway trips in my early career, to working with the Farbank team, Sage, Rio, Reddington, and that's how I met you. Was close proximity to a great fishery like the Yakima, and we were up the road often. And then worked at Fish Pond, and I currently work at Umpqua, where I'm our director of sales and marketing over here, which is just so fun to be on the fly side of things. Flies are just such an interesting part of our sport. You can learn so much about an angler just by what they choose to assort in their box, and then how they organize their box or not organize their box. It's a lot of fun. And then, man, throughout my time at Sage, Fish Pond, and Umpqua, I had competed for the U.S. national team for 12 years, went to 6 world championships, and have stepped away from all of that. And my life was always, I felt like a real yin yang balance there, where I needed to have steelhead in my life, where you had kind of this casting, very emotional, chasing moments, fishery, and then you had trout, which turned into a little bit more of a consumable commodity. And so now I find balance in other ways. I fish with my kids a lot. I take my father-in-law fishing. I fish a lot more dry flies, but it's hard to take some of that competitive spirit out of a person that's done it for a while. Um, but yeah, it's been a long ride in the old fly fishing industry, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I consider myself a pretty lucky guy to have all these fun experiences and meet incredible people along the way.
Yeah, well, you got to fish three rivers this week, right?
Not too bad.
Yeah, Three Rivers. Yeah, tell us who were. You're back home in Colorado now, but you just got home last night, late night. But yeah, tell us where you fished this week.
Yeah, I spent a couple days chasing steelhead around the Clearwater, which, for anyone that's been there, knows that that's kind of like the big leagues when it comes to steelhead fishing. Big fish, tiny flies, long casts, difficult wades. It had a blast doing it. It beat me down so bad. I said, I'm gonna call an audible for my last day of kind of fun fishing on Sunday, heading over towards Ellensburg. But went over and talked to one of the longer, Kinsley Scott, who runs your guys' Klickitat Steelhead Camp, and she dropped me a couple spots to go check out on the Klickitat River. And man, again, I didn't touch a fish, but that was kind of just what a guy needed. All day by yourself, wandering around in the woods. She gave me some great little hike in off the beaten path spots that just made you feel like you were in the middle of nowhere. And it was just you, the birds, and the sound of the river, which again made me super happy. And then ended up on the Yakima, right outside the fly shop, which, man, as I was thinking about this driving up there, I think it had been at least 10 years since I put a fly in that river. And Um, and yeah, it looked very familiar, but a little different than I'm used to seeing it too.
Oh, it's so low, but it's kind of fitting. You got to go do big league fishing, spay fishing for steelhead, especially for the big bee run fish on the Clearwater. And then you went to the Klickitat, which is typically a few more steelhead. Um, like steelheading is, man, you got to be willing to take a goose egg every now and then. But then we went and you got to poke a whole bunch of little trout yesterday with
It
me
felt
on
good.
the on the Yakima, and yeah, it's kind of a good order to do it in. Like okay, I'm going to validate my skill set a little bit by just getting a lot of hookups, and
Yeah, and
that
I
was a lot of fun.
absolutely, and I anymore. We've got a lot of great home water. I live in Golden. We've got Clear Creek out the backyard. I love just about every fishery we've got in a 2 hour radius from home. But I do get to fish a lot of different places, and I find I love the diversity that our sport kind of gives us, right? You can go travel, you can see new places, you'll learn new things in talking with different people, and you know, everyone's got a little bit different way they approach something, even steelhead fishing, right? The way they do it on the Clearwater compared to the Klickitat. I mean, it's night and day different between the two. Um, it's so, and even just, you saw me fishing some water that I defaulted to on the Yakima. I was like, man, if there were brown trout in the river, this is, and you're like, yeah, but they're not in here, so that you're wasting your time. Uh,
Yeah, those rainbows, those rainbows like the fast water, man.
so anyway, I do love getting to kind of travel around and see some new stuff. But also just dig your heels in and really, really get to know and be intimate with some fisheries too.
Yeah, it was really great getting out with you yesterday. Um, yeah, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I like steelhead fishing. I love trout fishing. Like for me, it's easy. Like if I had to choose one, I'm choosing trout. I like bugs. I like the game. I like the different approach. I like that I can dry fly fish, streamer fish, indie fish, tightline nymph. I like figuring it out. I like the challenge that trout deal me on it every day, and I can I can quickly make an adjustment in a maneuver, and not every time I change flies or strategies or the water type yields a result. It often does. Maybe it's every other time or every third time or every fourth time. But with steelhead fishing, you really need to kind of set in motion your plan for the day. And what is it you call it? Presentations per minute? Like
PPM.
PPM, dude. Competitive term. We'll unpack that. But like with steelhead fishing, I mean, like presentations per minute is really important. Like you have to if you stop to change, if you stop to like reset or try it. Typically with steelhead fishing, a major strategy change does not yield a result, but seldom. Whereas with trout, I can make these fine adjustments. Like yesterday, you figured out really quickly that switching from a silver bead to a copper bead had an almost immediate impact on your catch count. And to me, that's fun. I am always curious. I like figuring stuff out. I like making a change and seeing a result. And I guided for steelhead for a long time, and I still run a few trips here and there. I like steelhead fishing, but I absolutely am passionately in love with bugs and trout fishing.
I think you bring up a really good point there, Joe. And from my perspective, the way I think about those two is that with steelhead fishing, I'm not good enough. I don't get to do it enough. There are so few data points to go off of, right? And this is why I think traditional patterns do so well in steelhead fishing. It's like, well, they've caught them for 50 years, you're probably still going to catch one. But in trout fishing, it gives us the opportunity to actually like have data and feedback and like respond to that, and you can make the changes based on what you're seeing. And um, I know we kind of talked about the competitive background a little bit, but I think that was one of the coolest things about competitive fly fishing for me was that you didn't do it in isolation. I mentioned getting to work with you yesterday, right? And I was learning from you as you're getting results and I'm not getting results. Like, well, what's he doing different? And started to make decisions based on what I was seeing you doing. Um, the idea of competitive fishing is you do work with a team, right? So you've got people that A, you respect, B, you know, are super fishy people, but you're doing it on the same waters, right? And so you've got this like really unique scenario where people are going down to the deepest depths of the hole with you, and they're going to figure out a river as quickly as possible, right? And so like at the end of the day, you'll compare flies, and they might not all be the same flies, but there might be a very clear theme within those flies that like, oh, this is what we did. Or you fish with someone long enough and it's like, oh, I was up in this part of the water, I got him in this water type, and like you can instantly go see a river, right? And you walk up to a piece of water you've never fished before, and you have all of this in the back of your mind, right? The flies that we caught them on, the type of water, and you're like, cool, I can go replicate this here because I have all this data available to me that you just don't find in a lot of other fisheries that trout fishing does provide. And if you like that kind of stuff, it's a lot of fun to go like put together the pieces of a puzzle. And guides do that on a regular basis, right? I know they've all got their text chains where they're checking in with each other and, hey, I found them up at da 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 da, and we were fishing it. They're doing the same thing, but uh, with Euro nymphing and the tight line stuff and the competitive aspect, you're going to just weird. You're trying to go to the weirdest places possible. To everything is an option, and you start throwing out what almost what is working, right? To try keep trying to crack the code of what might work.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because I was talking to some guys in the shop this morning, and I was going to ask you, like, tell us a little bit, kind of the short version of it, because we're going to get into I got a list of questions here, man. I can't wait to unpack some of this. But like fishing on, the team in Team USA and the team that has been assembled from obviously different parts of the country, different backgrounds, totally different skill sets and perspectives and styles. But when you're working with that team, which you obviously are a team, so you need to help each other. But you guys, would you have strategies where you divide and conquer a little bit? Like, hey, today would you try this or do this? How would you guys share information, and how has that been helpful for you in building your skill set to what it is today?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's critical. Like if you're not, I've met people who are wonderful anglers, very skilled, have all of the right elements, but they're not a sharer, right? So they're not part of a team, and you will watch that person struggle. Um, and then you've got, I'd put myself in this category. You've got people that are a fine angler, right? Nothing extraordinary, but when you work well with the team, you can become extraordinary and accomplish a lot. And so being able to not only give information, but receive it and actually do something with it is absolutely critical. And I mean, you'd know this. I mean, even if you've just got a fishing buddy you like to fish with, or if you're a guide or you work at a shop, like you talk with someone long enough or you go fishing with them enough times, it's pretty, you know how they fish, right? So, like, for instance, Lance Egan, I know Lance always fishes heavier, right? Heavier flies. And so when he says, oh, I was fishing, knee deep water, I was like, well, he's a bead size heavier than I would probably fish. And so, like, maybe I need to up my bead if I'm not catching him as quickly as Lance was getting. So, like, just time with friends essentially is invaluable from that perspective. And um, when you're, especially when we would travel as a team, you're going to spend 12 days and all you're going to do is talk about fly fishing, talk about the rivers, talk about the fish, talk about the flies, tie flies, re-talk about the fish, re-talk about I mean, it is, you literally don't, there's no other, there's no other headlines in the world that exist. You are so focused and all you're talking about is that. So it is the secret is just this giant kind of universal mind when it comes to a river. So like we would go overseas and there are 5 different venues you're going to fish. So we wanted to fish each one of those venues for a day, which isn't a lot of time to figure out a river, right? So you're a river or lake. You'll go there, you spend the day, and everyone's going to do something different. Like we had a guy that literally would get to a spot and he's like, well, I'm not going to move spots until I start figuring something out here. and would stay at that spot for hours and hours and hours. And I'm like, you gotten it yet? He's like, nope, haven't figured anything out. And, and there's other people that are just like, I'm going to move as quickly as I can and figure out something as fast as I can, right? And like racing up the river, right? Maybe it's a water type I need to find. So everyone's kind of working on something different. Someone might say, I'll swing some streamers through here, or some wet flies or something like that. Someone might try dries. And then you kind of reconvene for lunch and what'd you find? And you start sharing stuff. You're like, ooh, all right. Like, well, that seemed to work really well. I want to try that now. And then you can confirm a data point, or you can say like, dude, I didn't get a single one to eat that fly, but I got to eat this fly. So it's like with 5 or 6 rods in the water and everyone talking about every little detail of their day and having people that actually listen and care to listen to every little detail of the day, you can put together a quick package of that fishery, which is kind of cool.
I'm kind of reading between the lines, but you commented something, and it sounds like there's an element of humility that is essential for somebody to become that extraordinary angler that you described. Because if they're not willing to listen and they're not willing to, follow these data points, they're not going to get everything that they can get out of an experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I
And
also I also like what you said about the guy that will just plant himself. I mean, what an interesting strategy, because that is so far. I say this on this podcast a lot, Russ. This podcast is really geared towards weekend warriors. I think a weekend warrior is an absolute compliment and a great place to be for somebody who's using their recreational time as as effectively and enthusiastically as they can. And I say this, what I say again and again is guided boat fishing is not what this podcast is about. This podcast is about people that are out there on foot trying to make some action with a fairly limited amount of time, because that's reality. I mean, most people don't live the life that you and I do, where we can either choose or not to choose to fish when conditions are good. Um, I, I live in a pretty luxurious position where I can literally, I'm looking at the river over my left shoulder right now. And if I thought the fishing was really great, I could go. If I thought the fishing was bad, I'll stay inside. Most people don't have that luxury, so they're forced to fish even in suboptimal conditions. And I really like what you said about the guy that didn't move, because although he may have put up smaller results, so we're talking about pre-fishing, which is fishing. Uh, he may have put up smaller results, but if in the back end of that day he deduced exactly what the advantageous flies were after working through a dozen fly changes and different weights and different speeds and all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden he ends up with success, that may be the most valuable piece of intel that there is. And I don't think people do that enough. And it's something we don't get the option to do, like as guides. Guiding is not fishing, as you well know. As guides, we move the boat downstream. We might try a few different flies. Often we're fishing, and guiding with people that may have a skill set that's, they're a lot of neophytes, a lot of newer anglers to guided fishing. But the act of standing in a spot where there to be fish, 100%, you're throwing at a captive audience, and then finally deducing what they're willing to eat. Imagine the results when you figure that out after you move on. And now you're like, I got them. Now I can use the most effective strategy possible and provide coverage, and cover more water quickly. And so I don't think people do that enough. I think people get sedentary and stay in one spot too long, but I don't necessarily think that they're being strategic about how they, are changing flies or styles, to try to figure it out.
totally.
Hey, I don't know. I forgot to share this, just for podcast listeners, because I've mentioned Russ on the podcast before, but Russ is almost exclusively responsible for getting me into tightline nymphing. And I don't even remember what year it was. It was probably like, I don't know, at least 10 years ago. Yeah, because when did you move to Colorado?
7 years ago.
Yeah, and it was well before you moved to Colorado.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to recap the story. Told it before and give you the
I
cliff
guess.
notes.
Oh,
And I'm going to
anyway, a
provide.
while ago.
I may provide subtle embellishments, but we had our annual Reds rendezvous. Some people have been asking about Euro nymphing. I wasn't interested. I thought Euro nymphing was stupid because the great Joe Roeder had tried Euro nymphing before and proved that it wasn't a viable strategy for this area in Western fly fishing, because if it wasn't very effective for me, the technique must be flawed or inefficient because I'm such a great indicator fisherman. What the hell do I need this Euro nymphing thing for? So, but there was some interest in it, and Russ came out and did a seminar. I wasn't able to attend because I had some other stuff going on at this big event that we have. And at the end, I heard some really cool things. People, I don't know how many. Do you remember doing that clinic? How many people were at the clinic?
Not that many.
I mean, I heard about it because some people. You said some things that were like really earth
I
shattering
remember,
for some folks.
yeah, I remember where we did it. I remember catching some fish. I don't remember exactly how many people were there, but uh,
Well,
it did. Coming from Colorado, Urine Infinite really just kind of caught on, but it hadn't. I don't think a lot of people had seen it out there. I think they'd heard about it, but they had no idea what it was.
I had no idea what it was. We're going to kind of explain it. But essentially, Russ puts this clinic on. The water is high and dirty. We canceled almost all of our guided trips that day. Russ goes out and does this clinic, catches fish during the clinic. I think you got to a total of 8 fish. By fish number 6, I was intrigued. I'm like, okay, I got to learn this. And then you did a little private, like after hours for our staff, where you're like, okay, let me show the staff. And you're like talking about the leader setup and everything. And I specifically remember going, oh my God, Russ caught more fish standing here on dry land with a beer in his hand than our guided trips caught today in these conditions. And I was like, to catch on dry land, the Yakima River is not the Bighorn River. Okay. We do not have the fish per mile count that they do. This is a big, wild, difficult stream. You caught more fish standing on dry land than most of our guided trips would have caught that day. And I was like, by the time I heard you caught like fish number 6, I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I have to learn how to do this. It was very humbling. It was very humiliating actually, because I'm like, I thought I was a pretty good fisherman, but there's no way I could have put up 6 fish standing on dry land at one spot in front of reds, which isn't even optimal water. And then I remember like you set the leader up, and then I was flogging around with it, and you're like, lift, drop, no, oh, I could hear you groaning, like like we do, and I'm like, I think I'm doing it right, but I can hear you groaning and wincing and sighing, like, oh God, like you're just watching me do it, and I think I'm doing it right, and then finally, I think you caught your last 2 fish after I tried it, and you're like, I'm like, oh my God, this is like the most humiliating feeling. I'm like, I have to learn how to do this, not so that I could catch more fish. I have the luxury again of doing guided trips with my team. I can jump in a boat any day I want. I can just fish when it's good. I don't care about. I've enjoyed the heck out of it, but my motivation was exclusively to try to get more do-it-yourself anglers having success. That was my motivation. The following week, I don't know if you remember this, you sent me a Sage ESN rod,
I
a
do
10
remember
foot
that.
broomstick, 10-foot 4 weight. It was the rod you didn't like.
Probably why I had an extra one.
But I took that rod, dude, and I told myself, I am going to learn how to do this. One of our guides, Curtis here, had been introduced to it on the Truckee River,
Yep.
and he had a little bit of experience. And we built these redneck leaders. We used 20-pound backing for cider, and we didn't have cider material. We never even sold it in the store at that time. We built ciders out of backing and just got going. And he showed me a couple of more things. And I just decided I'm going to learn this. And I put every other rod down, and I was like, I'm going to learn how to do this. And it was a hell of a learning curve. I will tell people that, like, my thoughts on this, and we're going to hear yours on it in just a second, because I actually do have this outline in front of me. I got to follow this outline at some point. But people, in my experience, when I've introduced it to people, they try it just enough to hate it and get frustrated, and they're not humble enough. I was in that same position. So this is no offense, people. But
I'll share my story of how I got into it because it's very similar to yours.
yeah, people try it just enough to hate it, and that was me. And I went back to my old bad habit. I mean, frankly, bad habits and a misunderstanding of why I'm doing it. Because I fish with the tight line rig. I want to show people it so they catch a few more fish than they are now. They're not going to conquer the world. They're probably not going to catch too many. That's not a threat, folks. It's not going to ruin fly fishing for you. You're not going to catch too many. It'll be harder than you think to learn it, but once you kind of get there, you're going to be extremely satisfied, because I think that the thing I mentioned about most weekend warriors, most folks that have a job, they got a life, etc., you're often fishing in suboptimal conditions. You're not going to be there during the big hatch all the time. You're not going to be able to float and cover 20, 10 miles of river, whatever the heck is required on a day, um, where it's suboptimal to just cover water with big flies. The last thing I would say that I kind of want to hear your inspirations for getting started. Uh, oh, I lost my train of thought there, but yeah, I lost my train of thought. I'm looking at this outline, and there's like 25 things that we need to get to
Well,
as far as bullet points go. But
I'll
yeah,
I'll
share.
jump in with my experience. It's very similar, Joe. Like, I was working at a fly shop. I thought I was the guy behind the counter. I knew everything, best angler anyone's ever met, like knew everything. As you know, post college trout bum. Um, and I was, dude, I was good with an indicator. I could fish. One of the guys I was working with was on the team, and this was my first introduction to it. And I still know Rob. I consider him one of my good mentors. He he said you should come out to one of these qualifiers. We've got one. Just check it out. And my goodness, that humble pie tasted great. I got
Yeah. So what happened?
absolutely.
You went to a little like qualifiers, like
Oh,
a
no
cup
big deal.
tournament.
Yeah, come on out. No big deal. I got absolutely crushed. Um, so much so that, like,
Guys were just catching way more fish than you.
way more fish. And, we had a lake session. I'll never forget Mike Sexton, who's an Umpqua tire, also, on Team USA. He's literally sitting there with his feet crossed on the gunnel of the drift boat as we're in this lake. Oh, another, like one after another catching fish. And I'm literally sitting 4 feet away from him. And I'm like, dude, he's like 10-1 on me right now with fish. Like, this is embarrassing. Like, what is happening? And so I came back and I said, well, I want to learn about this. And Rob was like, I figured that'd probably be the case. Um, and I committed to it. And Joe, on my local rivers, I started catching far fewer fish. Like, it was like you said, a commitment where like, I'm like, all right, well, normally I'd go out and this would be a stretch where I'd get a dozen, right? I got three. Like, what did this going the wrong way here? Like, this isn't helping me. Rob was a good mentor in the fact that he didn't give you the answers. He let you find all of your own answers, which I think was better. I bought at the time, which was the only book on Euro nymphing, called Check Nymph, and had to order it from
Big
Europe.
hardback book.
And just rudimentary compared to where we're at now, and rudimentary in the, I mean, what's available on the internet from reputable, it's incredible. But this were different days, but there came a point where the light turned on, and I just, instead of 12, it was 15, and then it was 20, and then it was 25. And it started to get really fun because you could start to figure out different things in the river that you never looked at. And it opened up new water that an indicator wasn't appropriate in. And so anyway, that was my intro. And then once I kind of got into it, then I was like, well, I want to try another one of these qualifiers and see if I'm still going to come in last, because I'd like to not come in last. And then it just kind of led to a long time of trying not to come in last. And then you win a couple of them, and you think you figure some stuff out, and you go check out some other rivers, and someone beats you with a blue mop pattern that you've never even thought of assorting in your box. And it just, you never stopped learning. And that was the thing for me that kept me going so long, was like the learning that it allowed you to do got addictive.
I can't even imagine like all this experience and competition and the sharing and the crowdsourcing of intel that takes place. How many people you've benefited in your network? Like, because you're the mentor now, right? Like, now you're sharing information with people and helping them because of all this exposure that you've had.
Yeah, just want to pass it on. I mean, that was the fun for me, was to learn more. And I feel like you get a hot tip, or you get something that you feel like is a pattern. It's not an absolute ever in fly fishing, because those really don't exist. But you share what you learn, what you experience, what you did. And uh, I think the coolest is when someone comes back and you say, "Well, I did that thing," and oh my gosh, like I had no idea. It made my day. And it's just like the coolest thing ever to hear, that you can help
It,
someone else out.
it's such good dopamine when you learn new techniques and then you chip away at it and have a little success. I get disheartened sometimes because I've sold so much tackle, and I don't ever mean to misrepresent fishing. Like, I do a lot of YouTube. Oh, by the way, for listeners that are just on the podcast, I'm going to post a video at the same time this podcast goes up of Russ and I fishing yesterday. We fished for a couple of hours, maybe 2 hours, if even, and I don't
Fast.
know, caught 12 to 15 fish right in front of the most popular access on the river. Literally, we parked in the boat ramp and then waited from the boat ramp and caught plenty of fish. But I'll post that YouTube video at the same time. But what I say about getting disheartened was, I never mean to misrepresent the technique, but I think, like, if people, watch a YouTube video, because I could certainly go out and under optimal conditions and catch an incredible number of large fish, on video, and be like, oh, look at the technique, buy this rod, get these flies. And I do get a little disheartened sometimes, because what people haven't seen is all of the struggles leading up to that point. Because it wasn't something that was super easy for me to learn. Um, I should have taken more instruction, and I did read George Daniels' book, which I thought was great. I thought he's just a great read. I like print material for learning a lot of these technical things, because I can flip back to a page. YouTube has a lot of clickbait, and so I think people kind of get lost a little bit. But I get disheartened a little bit, because there are a lot of anglers, and I'm sure some are listening. They have to be, because uh, a lot of people don't get over the hump. They try it just enough to hate it. They have a little bit of success, and your testimony of fishing your home beat in an area you would indie fish and get a dozen fish, and now you're tight lining, which is supposed to be like, you know, uh, a
I was supposed
Jedi.
to catch them all, Joe.
Oh God, the great equalizer. And then you're catching three. And then you're going, okay, I know what's in here. I've had my butt whipped in these competitions. I know this technique is valid. What's not valid is my skill set. And then you go back, okay, I'm going to keep chipping away at it. I'm going to get a few more and get a few more. But a lot of people unfortunately don't get over the hump. I think the time, people's recreational time is precious. But I would just encourage people listening, if you've bought the gear, you've tried it, you've experimented with it, you're not having the success that you expected or you think you're due, you have to stick with it. It's going to get better. You're going to get more effective. You're going to get a better understanding, and just stay humble. Leave your other rods at home and just stick with the tight line rod. It doesn't mean that's all you're going to do for the rest of your days, but I think that's going to be required for people to get to a point where you can become the guy that always catches fish, um, versus the person that sometimes catches fish, or unfortunately, there's a lot of these that usually don't catch fish. And if you're in that usually don't catch fish category, that's okay. It's going to get better. The catching will eventually take care of itself. But I would just encourage people, like, chip away at it. I'll just share this with you, Russ. I shared this on a podcast recently, but I went and did a seminar at the Western Idaho Fly Fishing Expo a couple years ago, specifically on tightline nymphing. Because I'm not going to be claimed to be the world's expert, but I've been in the struggle, and I work with a lot of customers that are in the struggle. So I think I offer some very pragmatic advice. But I went to the seminar, and it was overwhelming. There was probably 150 people in the seminar, and I asked them to raise their hands. How many people have rods that are purpose built for? And I hate the term Euro nymphing. I'm going to say tightline nymphing as much as I can, because I got some questions about that for you. But I said, hey, raise your hands. You got the purpose built rod for tightline nymphing? Tons of hands go up. Okay. So I got a rough count. I'm like, okay, how many people are catching far less fish than they expected? And almost all the same number of hands went up. Like, I think that it's been built into this thing where it's going to be, it sounds like it's going to be, because the potential the benchmark of potential is very high, that people think that it's easy to get there. And unfortunately, it's just not. It's like spay casting or anything else. But once you get there, it's amazing. But I wouldn't say I was entirely surprised by that, but I was a little disheartened. And dude, I doubled down on the information I was willing to share and like the enthusiasm which I want to deliver it, because I think there's a lot of people out there not catching quite enough to stick with fly. I think that they're, you know, public, highly pressured public rivers are not, I'm not going to describe it as easy fishing. Um, but this tool will also allow you to take a mediocre fishery, one that's unnamed, one of those red ribbon rivers, and make that red ribbon river a blue ribbon river. And to me, that's like super inspiring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not, if you were going to fly fish for 1 year, I probably wouldn't tell you to never learn a new technique, right? Just here's one method, and go throw a dry dropper in there. You'll have a great day looking at clouds and enjoying birds, and you might catch a couple trout along the way. But if this is something you want to get into and have it be a lifelong thing, or if you're already a committed angler, I don't ever see the harm in really committing yourself to learning something new. And I don't care what kind of fishing that is. It's going to translate into every other aspect of your angling. And I think tight line, Euro, whatever you want to call it, is a great one to spend some time, because you do get a lot more data out of it. And man, you saw me, Joe. These techniques have gotten so refined that the bites from the little 3-inch smolt are very well detected. So you catch more fish. I'm not saying you only catch big fish, you only catch medium. You get a very good sampling of what the river has to offer, from dinkers all the way up to some fish that you don't land. But all of those are data points for an angler, right? And that's why I think you should commit to spending some time figuring it out a little bit.
Oh, when I went brain dead earlier,
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember what I was going to say. It was about, like, I was listening to you, kind of weigh this out. And I was like, I said, it was a very humbling experience to go, oh my gosh, like I'm not half as good at quarter as good at angler as I thought I was. And I'd been guiding a long time. Like I was like you, I'm God's gift to guiding and fishing, and I'm so
I
great,
know what's up.
and then you meet somebody that is like, you're like, oh, I am not important to these trout. Here's what you said. I had a couple of things that I heard you say that were very profound at the moment. And dude, I was hanging on your every word. You said, man, Joe, we're not fishing. Like if you throw, most of the time you throw your indicator in there, you fish a hopper dropper, you fish suspended, all fine techniques. Those are great. We're not fishing for the aggressive fish. We're fishing for every fish. Like I want the lazy fish. I want the fish that's not hungry. I want the fish that's gone on a diet. Like I want every fish in this river. So therefore, I'm going to try to make my flies look as natural as I can. And I want to detect even the weakest bite. Yeah, I pitched a couple of those 3-inch smolt, behind me yesterday. I don't like doing it, but yeah, when you're on these delicate rods with these delicate setups, I mean, presenting a tiny nymph, you need that delicacy in order to make that tiny nymph act natural. And you said, yeah, Joe, we're not just fishing for the aggressive fish. Like you might get, like anybody can catch the aggressive fish when they walk up to a bucket. Like that fish is a gimme. Like that's a given. We're fishing for every single fish in this run, and we're going to try to refine our technique to where maybe we're not. I mean, it's ludicrous to say we're going to catch every fish in the run, but we're going to try to dial in our technique and our own abilities in order to have the potential. And then I want to follow up. I actually wrote this note down. Uh, this is an interesting perspective. You were talking about, hey, if somebody's just going to fish for a year, like what are they going to do? Like this is probably not where you'd start. This to me is like an avid weekend warrior, wants to catch fish, is fishing public water, doesn't want to go on a guide trip. Like it speaks to that person. But just yesterday, it was 5 p.m. I was just leaving. I think a little after 5? I was just leaving the shop, and then three college students were coming in into the shop, and we only had one guy working in the behind the counter late last night. So I was like, oh, you know what? I'll run in, and I can see he's busy. I'll just come in and help these guys. I came in and talked to these 3 college freshmen. and super enthusiastic. Like they don't know a lot about fly fishing, but they know that they're going to college in town here, just like I did. They want to get after it and have some experience outside of the, the the college life to do. And so I'm like counseling these guys. I'm like, okay, you're going to be fishing here in college for 4 years. I go, here's the deal. Dry fly fishing is going to be exclusive to optimal conditions when there's hatches early, late. Like you're not going to be able to cover enough water on foot in order to be able to have productive dry fly fishing regularly, especially in the fall. What I did said, hey, here's what you guys do from now through spring. Get some Loon tip toppers. You get a little yarny indicator. Get a single beadhead nymph with a tungsten jig and fish that one style rig. Do not change. Get super good at fishing a yarn and a single fly, and don't get confused. Don't deviate. Master
Not
that
really
one.
complicated either.
It's super simple, but I mean, you go to New Zealand fishing for the most and arguably the most technical trout fishing on earth. I've not been there, but they build it up a whole bunch. What are they doing? Single nymph and a yarn indicator, man. And so it's funny because I told these guys, I go, don't change this till March. Like, just do this. Don't do anything else. Get really good at it. And I think there's a lot of value in sticking with stuff.
Yeah, totally. The only thing I'd build on, Joe, on the catch 'em all stuff, and I know people hate that term.
It's annoying.
It's annoying. I'm going to say two things. One, I think it's up to the angler, right? What defines a good day for them, right? I don't ever go out and be like, today's a 100 fish day. Let's go. I go out and I say, hey, I want to go enjoy fishing this run. And when I am enjoying fishing a run, I am not thinking, I'm literally reacting to what the water puts in front of me. And I'm placing flies and I'm manipulating flies. I'm changing flies based on what the water says. And that to me is a fun day. Right. And then if I get feedback from having fun and doing all those little subtle things and it results in higher catch rates, that's the byproduct of me having fun.
That's
I'm
good. That's good dopamine right there. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And so anyway, I just want to say that on the catch 'em all, right? And the idea of catching them all in the competition world, you get a beat. So you get a fixed amount of water to fish. And so you're going to spend 3 hours fishing a given stretch of water, and it'll vary in length. On the short side, they're 50 yards, 25 yards on the very, very short side. That means you've typically got a little higher density or a really wide river you can wade. On the longer end, you'll have 100 yards of water to fish. So 3 hours. So some of those, it means you've got to really figure out what every fish wants, right? And we can get good at figuring out what the predominant theme is of the day, right? So there's very few moments in angling where you can say this was the definitive what they were eating. Some of those emergences where it's very obvious that all of the fish seem to be up on a trico hatch and you've got mouths everywhere and the river's boiling, right? It doesn't happen very often. Mostly it happens like you would order dinner at a family reunion, right? If you were to go to a large family reunion and you say, hey, what do you guys want to do for dinner? You're going to have a group that says, well, I want to do some Italian, and then there's a Chinese group, and then they want to get some Indian food, or I want to grill burgers, and everyone's got a different answer. And then you put Italian menu, and you've got someone that wants to eat pasta. You've got someone that wants to, have the chicken parm. Like, it's so individualized for the fish. And this is where, like, catching them all means you have figured out what you want, trout, and what this trout wants. And it's a lot of fun when you are at the point where you feel like you plugged in some flies, like a junk fly, right? Like a mop, a worm, an egg. There's that junk food eater that wanted that double whopper and is going to run over and smack it right away. You keep running that double whopper in there, and the health food nut is going to go hide under a rock. And so you got to know when to take that double whopper off quickly and say, all right, we're going to go serve this guy some quinoa salad here. And something real small and technical. That's why flies to me are just it's the ammunition at which you get to play the game. Like this brown trout wanted to eat a dry fly. The two rainbows that were with the brown trout wanted to eat nymphs. Like they did not want anything to do with the dry fly. Like That's what catching them all means to me, is that you figured out there were 3 fish sitting in a bucket. You just didn't get the easy aggressive one. You figured out how to get the other two. And that doesn't mean getting 100, right? It doesn't mean getting 1,000. It doesn't mean catching every fish in the river. It means for that given scenario, you figured it out.
It's so well explained. Yeah, because I just want people to catch some. Like at not, I 99% of anglers out there, I just want them to catch some fish and do so
Have fun
consistently.
in our sport. It's fun to catch fish.
Well, like, and when people get progress their skill set a little bit, like I'm trying to learn how to like jig mop flies. Like I'm not very good at that. Like I know that people catch a lot of fish on mop flies. I've caught fish on mop flies. I will use them. I I am not good at it. I mean, I've got to learn to jig them. I've got to learn to move them. I've got to learn, how to read water types better for those junk flies as you call them. So like I don't just go out and stick with the same fly. If I catch 3 or 4 fish, I'm like, okay, what's next? Like maybe I'm going to learn how to, like we talk about, and I don't know, I can't remember if the final edit of the YouTube video had this in there, but you were talking about aggressively jigging flies.
Mm.
Like, that's something that you can only do on a tight line rod is manipulating and moving flies.
It was, I think I briefly shared the story with you. We were fishing the Gunnison and we were floating through, and I was with my father-in-law, and he wanted to fish dries out of the boat, which was great. Weekend warrior version of me had a Euro rod in the boat for those in between times where my father-in-law wanted to break, and I just wanted to go see if I'd catch a trout. There were these 2 weight anglers in this riffle. And I watched them catch a couple trout while we were eating lunch, and they waited on. And I got out the Euro rod. I was like, oh, there's got to be something in this riffle. I dead drifted. I didn't get anything. And that's what they were doing. Dead drifting flies under an indicator. And I started aggressively jigging and get normal kind of like tap, 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 tap through there. And I don't know why, but I started to like, like as hard as I could. And I mean, it was immediate. First fish. Whoa, that was crazy. Boom, like, and they just started absolutely annihilating flies. And I was like, in what world? You can't do that unless you're going to do the way I was doing it. You know what I mean? Because you're doing it 3 feet underneath the water and you're moving the fly 5, 6 inches as fast as you can through there. And these fish, why they loved that, I could not tell you. But it was awesome how great they took that fly.
and to figure it out, which is really cool. Uh, let's talk. Let's talk real quick, and we'll start to get a little bit more tactical here for the back end of this. But like tell us why tight line nymphing works.
I think one of the main reasons it works, Joe, is that you can't be lazy with it. The way that the tackle has all refined itself at this point, I think all of um, the manufacturers making this stuff is it's lighter, longer, and wispier. And so it doesn't allow you to be lazy with it if it's so light, so long. You can't flop it out there and just gently hold your hand by your side and just kind of be a passive participant in your drift. You're holding your arm out. You're having to watch this thin piece of 4X kind of react to you getting lazy and falling towards you, or react to, you getting fatigued and seeing the shake in the line. I think a lot of it is focus, the kind of technique requires you to have when it comes to focusing on how you're going to put those flies in the water, focusing on actually like working a drift. And I know we do that with an indicator, but it's so easy to be passive with that, right? I think if you were to have that level of focus with any kind of angling, and I think the tight line technique forces you to do that, you're just going to catch more fish.
It's interesting. I think it's part of the reason I've fallen in love with it is that hyper focus. I mean, it didn't occur to me, but I'm like, because it's hard to put your finger on why you fall in love with certain things. I'm like, I think it's the focus you're talking about because I'm in such fine control of that fly that if I don't focus, I can really screw it up in a hurry. And then also obviously the tight line grab.
Yeah, or you just miss the bite completely. And then there's tons of other benefits to that stuff. we talked about in the YouTube video, you can hit a 4-inch seam, right, and keep flies in that 4-inch seam. You can you can fish 10 feet of depth at a very, very slow rate where the surface current isn't going to be affecting what your flies are doing 10 feet down. You can manipulate flies 5 inches at a time as far as an up and down. You can hold flies, you can swing flies. Like it comes down to control, right? And I think that that's the element that I feel like makes the technique very, very exciting to fish.
It's just that extremely fine control. Yeah, and I think also fishing highly pressured public water, popular streams. I think it gives I'm a guide. I love our guide staff, but at the same time, guides do put pressure on the river, and I think this is one technique that you have as a do-it-yourself angler can have as an advantage over every guided boat that goes by. Takes the guided boat goes by, takes a glancing shot, a hopeful glancing shot at a spot, just one quick shot, but you get to plant yourself in that piece of water and work it over again and again and again as
Absolutely.
well. Uh, okay, let's talk about gear breakdown. Okay, so you're setting up your, does your father-in-law like to tightline nymph?
No, this isn't his
Okay,
game.
let's just say, let's pretend. Okay, father-in-law is going to go tightline nymphing. He's recently retired. He's really going to be getting after it out there. What length, weight, and action? We don't. I don't care about models.
Yeah.
That's a brand loyalty thing. I think for a lot of folks. I think everybody's making fine rods. Uh, what rod length and weight would you set your beloved father-in-law up with?
The 10-foot 3 weight is the 9-foot 5 weight of the Euro world. It's just a great versatile do it all. Um, I'd probably go there. It's amazing the size of fish you can catch on these light rods. I've been fishing a 10-foot 1 weight, um, and have landed plenty of very big fish, and that thing's bent into the cork, which is kind of fun. You feel like Lee Wolf back in the old photos where there's just this little hoop over your head as you're trying to land this thing in a circle. From there, I think having the right leader becomes the number one next big thing. And if you don't want to invest in getting a Euro specific line, then your leader is just super long. But I still like the feeling of fly line in my hand. I guess might be old school like that. It could be the competitive angler that's still left over in me there where we had to legally have that. But I like there's a lot of activation with the left hand. There's a lot of hand twisting. There's a lot of stripping. I still like doing that with fly line versus just mono, which would work, right? And so that's where I feel like the leader is the second most important thing. Um, well, nah, the flies might be the most important thing now that I really think about the whole system. And I say that not only as a fly vendor, but fly weight. Without the right fly weights, if you're too light, you're never going to obtain any depth. You're just going to find yourself never feeling the drift, right? You're just going to have your flies washing. Too heavy a fly, you're just going to end up losing a lot of flies or all over the bottom. And this is where people think we just snag fish. Fly weight becomes very, very critical. Again, on that control side of life. And
So
so,
you
like,
got to have a variety of obviously jig head nymphs rule the
yeah,
world now for this type of fishing, but you got to have everything from like 2 3s to 4 6s.
it
Good.
just helps you. And those flies can work in unison. Like the flies that are being sold in bins now are, man, if we had access to this stuff, I don't know if I would have been as into tying. I'm happy I didn't because it got me really into it. But like, um, you you can work in unison, right? So like you can have two light flies that work together to get down. You can have a really heavy fly and a completely unweighted fly, right? Like, you don't have to just have two massive bombs. And I think the from the intro side, I think a lot of people think they just have to. We talked about this in the YouTube video. Have that complete tight line to show that they're in contact with their flies, and that means they're typically fishing way too heavy. We talked about fishing that bow in your line, which means those flies are actually just completely loose and unattached where you're not going to feel the bite first. But when you're completely straight, so it's easy to fish too heavy. And I talk about vertical drag a lot, right? Where the flies are going to unnaturally fall through the current, causing fish not to bite. And I think a lot of people overlook that part. We talk about drag maybe up or down the river or left to right, but not vertically. And so anyway, flies are a super critical part, and just kind of figuring out those puzzle pieces, right? Where you can be not heavy enough, too heavy. And this is where like dry dropper, rigging up a Euro rod with dry dropper style, the same way you would do it, tag. Top tag, I'll have your dry fly on it, and you put a single bead. It's very familiar for a lot of folks too. I think it helps you learn the drift a little bit better than just going straight underneath the water and trying to understand the dynamic of how that's kind of translating to.
Yeah, I'll back up for a second because I started rattling some things that might be foreign to folks. But when I started to talk about like 2 3s and
Yeah, yeah.
3 3s and 3 8s and 4 6s, we're talking about the millimeter of tungsten bead on a nymph. And that does have a profound impact on what the fly does, how it behaves, and the presentation. So I just want to back up and just say that when you look at flies, you shop for flies. If it's listed what the bead size is, it's important to know that like a 3 3 is going to be way heavier than like a 2.8. It'll be. I don't. I've never weighed them, but maybe you know that you're a. We sell your guys as beads in the store. What is the weight difference between like a 3.3 and a 2.8? You know, off the top of your head?
3 3 is heavier and 2 8's lighter. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, it feels like it's dang near twice the weight.
Yeah, we have a grain chart in our catalog. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. They're
Yeah,
heavier, and then like the different kinds of beads, like the jig bombs, which you guys carry for the size of the bead, is the heaviest bead you can get, right? So like a jig bomb is mostly made of tungsten. Joe, that's the kind of bead you and I were talking about yesterday. So it's almost like a half weight. So if you had like a 4 mil jig bomb and a 4 mil slotted bead, which is what's on most, jig style flies, that's like really like a 4.5 weight, right? So it's not quite a 5 in a standard slotted, but it's heavier than a 4. So it's like kind of a cool half weighting size. And then so jig bombs are the heaviest. Then you've got our standard slotted, and then you've got a countersunk bead. And those are all the kind of different weights available to anglers. And umpquatize flies that are the same confidence pattern in two different weights, right? So you can really, even with, production flies, you can get very specialized. And if you tie your own flies, like there's a Cheeseman Canyon, one of our rivers here, they're just such deep drifts you're having to do all the time. I specifically for that river, I tie so many of my flies overweighted, like very oversized beads and very small hooks, because I know I need a lot of weight to get down, 8 feet where these fish are sitting.
man, that is deep. I'm going to try those jig bomb beads. I need to pick up a couple packs of those and play around with those guys. Uh, Yeah, so the bead size, matters a tremendous amount. And obviously these flies scale well to indie rigs or dry dropper rigs and things too. But you're kind of settling on like a 10-foot 3 weight for somebody who's going to fish a mix of different water sizes. That's a pretty good choice because the 10-3 will dry fly fish if you ask it to a little bit better than a longer rod. And then the uh, the other question that I had was like in competition. How often would you guys fish dry flies?
Oh, this is back to my Italian food example. There are dry fly eaters in competition. The folks that just Euro nymph are leaving 25% of the potential bites on the table. And that excludes any kind of hatch dependent uh, um, moment that you might have in that 3 hour window. And so like you'll have I fish tournaments where there's an emergence happening and they want the dry, right? You get to that level where it's like, oh, most of the folks here all want barbecue, right? That's great news for me. And there's targets surfacing and you can see where they're at. Like that's a dry fly moment. You throw a nymph at that fish and you're underneath it and it's worthless. Even the dropper, we did a world championship in Bosnia where a single ant was our number one pattern that took most of our fish over there. Bosnia was also the country where the U.S. team was first introduced to the Perdigon and brought it back to the U.S. And so like we literally saw that fly. It's kind of a funny story. We saw the fly for the first time from our guides over there because it's all single fly in Bosnia. And we all were like, there's no chance they would eat this. You know what I mean? Like, this is dumb, which I think is a lot of people's first reaction to seeing one until you see it in fish's face time and time again. You're like, okay, this thing crushes. But a lot of dry fly fishing. A lot of dry dropper fishing. And there's a lot of times where, man, that we talked about yesterday, the first cast always being downstream, right? Like stuff like that. But like you'll be fishing in so many of our Western kind of brown trout classic fisheries, these brown trout will sit in 4 inches of water right next to the bank. You're not putting a nymph into that water, but it's great dry fly water. And you get to watch that little thing tip up and again, they might not be 24-inch fish that sit in 4 inches of water, but there's a lot of 6 to 10 inch brown trout that can fill in moments of your day really, really nicely. So a lot of dry fly fishing. I think it's
Yeah,
overlooked.
yeah. Well, back to like, I think a lot of people just, myself included, because I've never been to a competition. I think I'd like to go either participate or observe at some point because I think there's so much to learn. But you're talking about 100, fishing 100 yards for 3 hours.
It's a long stretch too.
That's a long, it's a short stretch for the weekend warrior, like 100 yards for 3 hours. Oh my gosh, man, I fish 100 yards a minute some days in my boat, right? Like I'm leaving a lot of trout behind. But like when you walk into that 100 yards and you're talking about, yeah, there's fish just simply holding in water that we can't present a nymph because it's too glassy or it's too shallow. Yeah, you have to be able to walk out and have this big variety of skills to go, okay, I need to check the skinny glassy stuff first to make sure I don't push fish out of there. And so are you going from kind of like dry fly to hopper dropper to tight line? Is that in that order or?
I like fishing the river, right? So like I don't like fishing the technique, right? You're going to try to force something, right? If I just say, all right, this is my dry fly water, right? I might be halfway wading up a bit and be like, man, look at that one little pocket right over there. That is a perfect place for a dry fly. And I want to be able to just toss a dry fly in right there from where I'm standing, not have to go get anything different, not have to go, I mean, tie on a new fly. I don't, changing flies to me is the fastest, easiest thing that anyone could do and no one ever wants to do. But like, I want to just be able to tie on a new fly and do what I want to do and then go right back to doing what I was doing because that water type only existed in this one little pocket. But I've got just great nymphing water everywhere else around me. Does that make sense? Like
It makes absolute sense.
so
And
that's what I really like is to be able to do that. So I love having my flies ready to be able to have those moments available. The only thing that has gotten into a little bit of a tougher place to do that, where you can have kind of a one rod that does everything, because that was kind of how we used to compete back when I started. We've gone a lot more specialized now, where the nymphing rods, the nymphing setups, what we were doing yesterday, Joe, those are nymphing rods, and you can fish dry dropper on them extremely well. They a little bit of an upstream breeze like we had, and you're trying to do a single dry on there. I think I could wad it up in my hand and throw it further than I could actually present a fly with that leader. So I do carry a specific dry fly dedicated rod for those scenarios, but you can cover a lot even with a very, very light, like 2 mil tungsten dropper and a fly. You can cover a lot of those spots where they'll eat a dry.
yeah, okay, so I was gonna ask you for like versatility because I'm trying to like help solve problems for people because like they spend customers shop and spend money with us and I want to make sure we're good stewards of their commerce with us and I really like seeing people get into some type of crossover scenario where
Mhm.
they could leave the rig with a rod and they could dry fly, they could streamer, they could dry dropper and do all of the above. But like, are you fishing like a Rio Phipps line on your setup? Was that what you were using yesterday? Okay, so the real fib sign is just a long, let's just call it level. It may have a little taper, but it's just for those that aren't familiar with it. It's a very super skinny fly line that's level, like a 1 or 2 weight line. And
It's
but on your,
worthless for throwing dry flies. Yeah.
but you can, throw a dry fly. When you were in competition, is that what you would use, and you would just throw a dry fly on that very rod, or were you carrying 2 rods, or
2 rods.
okay?
You'd
So
have a second dry fly rod on your person that you could literally then reel up the nymphing rod or a dry dropper, right? You can do 3 of the 4 techniques extremely well with one rod. It is single dry fly presentation at distance that rod will make you lose your mind. Just because you can't be accurate with it. There's not enough mass to move the mass, especially, with the new techniques we're doing, the goal is to remove as much weight from that leader as possible, right? And that's tippet, that's the actual colored section, the indicator section, is to have that be thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. The thinner it is, the less it will affect your fly. So the further you cast out and there's more leader, even though it is 6-pound maxima, let's say, right? The more 6-pound maxima is outside of your rod tip and you're fishing at 30 feet, there will be weight and sag, and you will pull those flies towards you ever so subtly. The more mass you can remove from your leader, the further you can fish without affecting those flies whatsoever. But when it comes to dry fly fishing, it takes mass to move mass. You've got this bushy dry fly. Heaven forbid you put hackle on it. This is why so many of those compy style flies are all CDC, is because it's less mass than hackle would have, or foam, or anything like that. It takes mass to move mass. So we've intentionally removed so much mass from these Euro leaders and Euro setups to be very, very, very fine. So we can fish smaller flies at distance without drag. That it just doesn't work well for the dry fly.
got it. So dedicated dry fly rod. So two rod combo. Dedicated
You want
tight
to
line.
go to the 10th degree of nerdiness. Yes.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, I'm tracking with you. Um, yeah, the other little question, that I'm thinking here. You said something yesterday about, I can't remember exactly what you said, but like the cool thing about tight line nymphing is that you get. I think you said something like you get the
Yeah, yeah.
volume. What was that quote that you had?
I think I had something like it was like it's as close as you can be to streamer fishing with nymphs. Is it that
Yeah,
one?
I think it was like you get the volume of fish that you do with traditional indicator nymphing, but you get the grab like a streamer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It, it,
something
it,
like
it
that.
it's like streamer fishing with nymphs, just to kind of dull it down, right? Like you get a ton of bites, but you can feel the bites. Like it's almost like swinging, whatever you want to equate it to. Like man, and you can feel the bites, you can feel the bottom, you can feel a stick, you can feel the difference in all of those different things. You can feel a current change if you're fishing around a pocket. Like all that translates into a highly sensitive rod tip. The craziest thing though, Joe, in feeling the bites, we talked about that in the YouTube video a little bit, is during like an actual good emergence, or if they're on stoneflies or caddis, where the trout literally have to crush a shell, you can feel trout crush your fly um, during different and it is like, dude, it travels up your arm. It is such a fun feeling when they like crush the exoskeleton of a fly before they swallow it. It's awesome.
It's
And
a
you don't
dope.
get that with an indicator.
You don't get that with the indicator, man. It's a dopamine hit. Well, the other thing, you've obviously spent a lot of time elbow to elbow, in the river with people, doing this. What for, especially for the folks that are not catching the volume of trout they were promised when they bought their gear from Fred's Fly Shop LLC. Uh, what top 3 mistakes do you typically see for the greenhorn tight liner? Let's
Yeah,
start with one mistake, I guess.
let's see if I can get 3 for them. Because any tips are helpful, right? Because anyone might be. First off, I think is too heavy a fly. We want to feel that we're on the bottom, right? We feel like trout live on the bottom, and we want to be on the bottom, and that has a lot of issues with it, right? we're in the business of selling flies over here at Umpqua, but not at the expense of you just throwing them into the river. So fishing too heavy a fly to me is the first thing I see. They want to feel the weight of the fly. They want to feel the bottom, and fish don't ever tip down. Trout don't tip down to feed. If anything, they're gonna always tip up to feed, right? And this is where I'd suggest a dry dropper is a great introduction, right? Where the fish will tip up to eat that. You can control your drift a little bit better. The second thing I see a lot of people do is only fishing under their rod tip, right? And then and maybe this will go along. Yeah, no, fishing number two is only under the rod tip, right? And when done right, you have really about a 30-foot distance that you can effectively fish, right? If you pull that weight out of your leader and you get comfortable with these micro leaders and you spend some time behind the rod, you can really fish at distance, and that's when you really do start opening up more opportunity to yourself. And I think the third thing I don't see enough people doing, and I would say this in general, is they are unwilling to move their feet, because in the previous method, you are able to pull more line out, throw men's, and fish further away that way. But if you think I only have 30 feet radius from where I stand, I probably need to move my feet a heck of a lot more in order to fish more of my spot. So instead of just getting my ankles or knees wet, I'm probably knees to waist most days. Those are my three things, Joe.
Yeah, those are good. I was jotting down a couple things. Yeah, those are very good advice. I think moving, being able to do the angler is the pivot point for the drift, and you can certainly sprinkle the infield and the outfield, but you're still locked into this pivot point. When you change that pivot point by a half a step or a step, it changes the presentation dramatically, because it's a real short window that we're actually getting a good presentation. I want to talk about the traits I've seen amongst anglers I've seen really get over the hump. There's a few local anglers here that have been through our classes that we're seeing have tremendous success. And we're seeing a lot of those anglers, because they're having success, they're giving up golf and mountain biking and all these other hobbies, because they're out here catching trout now consistently. And I think the number one trait was they didn't give up. They stuck with it, and they have a high level of efficiency, and that results in a lot of presentations per minute, meaning they're probably pretty decent. They've gotten little systems down. Again, we gave a couple little tips in this YouTube video that I'll post the same time, but like having a good blueprint for how you're going to handle your slack line when you change flies. Are your nippers handy? Yesterday I was really inefficient. I was trying out the new chest pack from Umpqua, and I didn't have all my tools rigged up properly, and I felt like I was very inefficient. I was like, man, if my nippers were right here, if I had a little fly patch on the outside of my bag, like I could change flies much more quickly and get the weight right, because I'm either too heavy or too light, whatever it is. And I think that those anglers just have high presentations per minute, and I think that you have to slow down to speed up. And I think when people, the successful people I watch, they have those little nuances that, oh, I'm going to change flies now. My rod goes under my arm. I face downstream. I'm going to let the current tension keep my leader sorted out so that I don't wind up with a jumbled mess in my hands. I can change my fly, and then I can go back to fishing. I think that was just technically two things.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right?
Absolutely, and you got to go really slow when you develop those. Like, everybody has their own little routine, and I think people have to slow down. But I think snags and tangles are the mortal enemy of success. I agree with you on fishing too heavy. I think your first few minutes on a Euro rod, it's really important to fish heavy so that you feel a little bit of biofeedback during the cast. And you actually get to feel the bottom, like, okay, that's what the bottom feels like. And then I learned how to not snag. I think that's really important. I think people that are successful figured out how to not snag. And that could be on either, more aggressive leading of the fly, or it could be on adjusting their weight properly. But you shouldn't be losing very many flies. And I wrote this question down. Do you lose more flies on a day of indicator fishing or tight line nymphing?
Ha! That's a really good question. Um, this is a hard one for me to answer. I've got a lot of flies, and so I'm never really concerned about losing a fly. I'd be more bummed to blow the fish out of the hole that I wanted to catch a fish in than I would be to lose my fly. But I recognize I'm in a different position than most folks. Man, I would say it's about exactly the same. I find myself, right, depending on where you are and your indicator fishing, I find they're up this way behind me more often, right? Depending on the way I set the hook and if I miss a fish, right, and I throw it right up in the tree or if I tick the bottom. And I find when I lose flies indicator fishing, they're up in the tree more than they're down on the bottom. And when I'm Euro nymphing, they're down on the bottom on a stick that, like, you can, like I said, you can literally feel when it's like soft and you're like, oh, not getting this back. Um, and I find that's when I lose a fly is like on a stick that's sticking up and you drift into it and you're not getting it back. So I lose them all over the place. But yeah, Euro nymphing typically down, indicator fishing it's typically behind me. But yeah, they go.
Yeah, I think I lose a few more indicator nymphing.
Do you?
And well, you're talking about this, and I think part of the reason is a lot of times I'm indicator nymphing, my fly might be further away, and therefore it's just harder to retrieve. You know, where I'm tight line nymphing, well, it might be 15, 20 feet away, and I can just kind of walk upstream and loosen it up a little bit. So I think I lose a few more indicator nymphing, but like if people are listening and they've been like struggling with like an excruciating volume of fly loss, like enough to where you're like, this is cost preventative for me continuing this. You are doing it wrong.
Too heavy.
You're doing it wrong, man. Like you should not be losing that many flies. You know, losing a fly here or there is acceptable, but it shouldn't be like a lot of fly loss. I think that's a real misconception.
Yeah, and I'll say it again, and I think I've said it a couple times. Your trout don't feed down; they feed up. There's a handful of scenarios, right, where you watch them kind of route around the mud, but like their mouth is designed to feed up. So like it's to our advantage to always be above them versus below them.
Yeah, that's well said, and I think yeah, now I'm like literally going back in my mind on some of the days I've had where, I mean, there are days indicator fishing straight up works better. I mean, just no
Straight up.
doubt about it. I mean, certain conditions, food is mid column. I think that's not the majority of the time, but I'm thinking about times where I've been just shocked that I'm like, why am I not picking fish out of there? And one thing I watched you do yesterday with your setup was you had a pretty darn good distance between, like, we fish two flies a lot with this type of system, and you have, we typically refer to the bottom fly as the anchor fly, which is heavier. It taps the brakes, it controls the drift, it's the weight. And then we have what we might call a tag fly. That's my term for it. It hangs off a tag. And you ran your tag fly a solid 2 feet above your anchor fly. And I think that's a really wise way to set it up, wiser than mine. I've been fishing mine on average a lot tighter, and I think I need to get that up a little bit so that I am covering that mid-drift column, that food that's in the middle of the column, a little bit more effectively, instead of trying to keep both of them on the bottom all the time.
When I first got introduced to this, the old coach at Team USA used to fish a washing nymph, which is one that's about 3 inches, 4 inches on a tag right below the sighter. So you're always washing a fly in that very, very top column. So it was always an unweighted fly, but like he loved that. I found I tangled more when I had three, so I went away from that. But I know that picked up a lot of fish for him, was that washing tag that he had right underneath your colored section, which is kind of where we control our depth and is always kind of at a fixed point above the water. If you're hunting water types, right, or fishing some of those deeper kind of, traditional buckets you find on the yak, and you get the occasional rising fish. It's a great technique to pick up some of those too.
Got it. So that fly is kind of like washing around in the column. So like
Very in the very top of the column always, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That is super interesting. Well, I probably want to wrap this up. We're out there. Let me look at my. Yeah, I want to hear one off the wall, quote tippet. This is I'm going to post this on today's Tuesday. I'm going to post it as Tuesday's tippets. But yeah, sure. It doesn't even have to be about tightline nymphing, but just share one little tippet for us for somebody heading out here shortly, maybe this weekend.
Yeah, for me, with all of my fishing, my favorite thing is the preparation that leads up to the moment. And it doesn't matter if you're going to do a destination trip or just hit the backyard carp pond. Um, I like to be prepared for whatever that is. That means I've got my box organized. I can, even if it's just grab the bag, throw it over your shoulder, but like I'm kind of prepared for whatever I think may happen out there that day. And um, I don't think enough people think about what they're going to be doing. They just kind of go do it and react to it. And I think that's great. That's when I am functioning best, is when I literally am reacting to what the river's putting in front of me. But I am prepared to be do well in that scenario because I've put in time ahead of it to know I've got enough of my favorite dry fly, enough of my favorite nymph. I don't have two, I've got six of my favorite nymphs. And I've got them in a couple bead colors in case I need to switch out bead colors. Um, that's, I love the preparation of it. Fishing doesn't just have to happen on the river. On the weekends, I can think about and do fishing at my fly tying desk after my kids go to sleep and prepare for those days I've got coming up ahead. It's almost as enjoyable as doing the act itself, and it certainly makes the act of going fishing more enjoyable because I'm prepared for the scenarios that I make up in my head in the basement.
Yeah, flies are organized, gears together. Your tools are on your chest back instead of buried in the pocket like I was yesterday.
Well, to be fair, yeah, we sprung that one on you about 5 minutes before we went. So
I survived, not by much, but I survived. Yeah, I think my tip would be like I really think people should consider if they're going to be avidly fishing, very active, utilizing all strategies from dry flies to tight line nymphing. I think it's just for, like I said, for the do-it-yourself public water weekend warrior. It's such an important tool to have. I think they probably should consider starting to tie flies and tying jig head nymphs. Getting some of those jig bomb beads. Getting some of those are the X series hooks that I like so much. I think.
yep.
I'm so bad, man. I just walk down and grab the hooks. I don't even pay attention to the model. I look at the shape, and I like that slick coated black hook that's true barbless.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and I think fly tying doesn't have to be super complicated, but the ingredients start with really quality hooks, good quality beads of a few different colors, and then picking out some very very easy to tie, you know, um, slender Perdigon style nymphs. There's a billion of them out there to copy. Anybody who says they've got the nymph, that they've got it all figured out, it's the one you have to have, is lying. Uh, but I think that being able to produce your own flies gives you an emotional attachment to the success of that fly, and it also makes it much more cost effective to have a big variety of different weights and bead colors and nips as well. So a lot of the patterns I think that you and I both fish and tie are not very complicated. Um,
No, and sometimes it's fun to make them complicated just to make them complicated, but oftentimes for me, I said it earlier, I'd rather lose the fly than lose the opportunity to fish, especially if you're, you know what I mean, you're fishing for bigger fish or you've been catching some good ones and you're like, man, that is the layer that I just buried that fly into that rock. Get rid of that fly. The longer you spend on a fly to tie, the more you're going to care about the outcome of that fly coming back in your box. So those fast, easy ones mean they were fast and easy, and you throw them behind you and you move on. And yeah, man. As far as like hooks go, Umpqua, you guys have it. It's the XC210. It's a wide gap Perdigon style hook that in an 18, there isn't more gap that you can have. We do it down all the way to a 20 for some of those really technical stuff. We probably could have used a couple of those yesterday. And then the XC400, which is kind of the tried and true. You're never gonna be sad to tie on that one. But that 210 hook is one we came out a couple of years ago with, and all of the guys that just did the world championships said that that was their number one hook over there for their Perdigons, which is
That's
super
the
cool.
XC210.
Yeah.
Okay,
That one's super, super cool.
man. Yeah, don't tie flies on cheap hooks, people. I did that for years. Huge mistake. Big waste of time and money. The key ingredients, especially for these types of nymphs, is definitely the bead and the hook. You start with that. Keep it simple, stupid. The rest is easy.
Yeah,
There's lots of
and all of this is supposed to be fun. As nerdy as we just got with all of this stuff, and as nerdy as you can get, and the whole idea is that you're going to go out there and enjoy yourself, have a good time doing it, and as much as the goal is, being outside, enjoying the day, the goal is also to have a little bit more success on the water.
Absolutely. You got me kind of inspired to get my gear orged and be super efficient so I can just grab my rod, grab my bag, and go and just know it's all put together and it's super efficient. But anyway, thanks a ton for coming on, Russ. We're gonna do another one of these at some point because there's still like 20 questions that I've got for you. So yeah, sometime this winter I'm gonna ring you up again and we'll follow up on some of the stuff I didn't quite get to.
I love it. We'll do it from my tie-in cave in the basement, maybe. We
I
can
would
have
love, dude.
we can
It's
have some
on.
more random stuff available for us to talk about.
Dude, you won't be back up from Colorado up here this winter, but we're going to do a tying rendezvous this winter. Maybe I'll zoom you in on the big screen.
That'd be fun.
That would be super great, actually.
That'd be super fun. Let's talk about that.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. All right. See you later,
Thanks,
Russ.
thanks everyone for tuning in. If you guys have questions, Joe's your man on all this stuff. I've watched him catch a ton of fish before I got my first one. He knows what
Yeah.
he's doing, even though he's Mr. Humble over there.
Got lucky.